Many years ago, I built my first home server. It was an old i3 2nd gen. It's like, I think, 2 cores, and I don't even know if it had hyper-threading. But it was my first experience with Linux, and I hooked it up to an old USB external hard drive, and essentially it served as my NAS. Since then, I've built a couple more. Most recently, I had a Ryzen 2700 that functioned as my home server / living room gaming setup. And most recently, I upgraded to a full-fledged AMD EPYC-based beast. If you want to check that build out, I'll leave a link up there somewhere. But I haven't built one in a couple months, so I got the itch. I need to build another one. I figured, let's build a decent home setup on a budget build. And my goal was to build a functioning home server that can be used to run a couple VMs and act as a NAS with adequate storage space, all for under $500. So, did we do it? Let's talk about it. So if you saw the thumbnail or the title of this video, you've probably determined that yes, we did stay under our $500 budget. Now let's go over the parts. Starting with the CPU, I went on eBay and purchased a Xeon E5 2650 V2. Now, this is a 8-core, 16-thread processor, and I mean, it's old. I think it's from 2013, but the number of cores and threads in this will make it perfectly adequate for running multiple VMs. Now, the base clock is at 2.6 gigahertz, but it can boost up to 3.4. So that's decent single core performance. I mean, we're not building a editing workstation here or a gaming setup. This is a budget home server build, so this is more than enough. I paid $32 for this with shipping and taxes to my door. And you know, there are many of these on eBay. You can go with a lesser version or a more powerful version, depending on your budget. For the motherboard, this is probably the most interesting part of the build. This is a Jginyue motherboard. Now, if you haven't heard of that brand, I definitely believe that. This is one of quite a few Chinese-made boards that you see all over eBay and AliExpress. I've actually seen quite a few decent reviews on these, so while it does seem a little sketchy, my preliminary research says that these are pretty solid for the price and feature set. Now, the reason I did go with this specifically is that they include NVMe, which is very strange because the original X79 chipset does not include NVMe. So you do get the X79 chipset with NVMe built in, which will give you much better performance if you're running a bunch of VMs. The reason I know this is going to be good is because, you know, this is the original. I mean, you can't argue with that. Also, Game Assistant. In case we do want to run games, we have Game Assistant. Now, if you're worried about whether or not this has a strong CMPT, don't worry, it does. And obviously this is gonna work perfectly because it's tested. Great. Okay, jokes aside, I am praying that this actually works out. For RAM, I went with 32 gigabytes of 1300 megahertz DDR3. Another benefit of using X79 and server grade components is that you can use ECC memory, which is error checking, so you get more stability out of it. We got 32 gigabytes for $45. And I forgot to mention, I paid about $125 for this motherboard. So for an NVMe drive, I initially bought a 256 gigabyte Toshiba for $30, but we've had some complications with the United States Postal Service. They apparently couldn't deliver it, and they're supposed to return it to sender, but it's lost, and I put in tickets with USPS, and you're just closing them and not contacting me, so you guys suck. So in place of that, I'm just using a NVMe drive I had laying around. This is a 1 terabyte Western Digital Blue SN550. So for raw storage, I went with 4 of these HGST 2 terabyte hard drives. So they're 7,200 RPM. Yes, they're a bit older, but I got them from a reputable eBay seller. To cool this processor, I've heard some good things about this SNOWMAN brand. So I got this off of AliExpress for $20, and it apparently has decent reviews. So I figured, why not give it a shot? I keep forgetting to do this, but I paid about $25 each for these hard drives. So grand total came out to about $104. Okay, the last 2 pieces of the build are the case and the power supply. Now, I already had a case with a power supply from an older build, so I just went with that. Now, obviously, that's not really free, so I'm not gonna say, oh yeah, just pull this out of your closet and use that. So I've allocated about $40 for a case. You can find a decent case for sale on Newegg or Amazon for around $40, so let's go with that. And same thing with the power supply, allocated about $50 for that. So grand total for everything here was $449. Pretty solid based on the hardware we're putting in this thing. Now, obviously you can go on eBay or Craigslist and find an old server, an old Dell Optiplex or something that somebody's selling for a couple $100 and say, here's my home server. I fully endorse that. If that's the route you want to take, awesome, go for it. There's no gatekeeping on home servers. You can do whatever you want. But I want to do something a little more fun and get something more customized to my needs. And it's just more fun to build it myself. So let's start building. Okay. All right, Jginyue. Oh shit, I already ripped the box. Let it be noted that it does not come with the motherboard battery. So make sure that you have one of the CR2032 batteries if you go with a board like this. Okay, so up here you can see the NVMe slot, which is very strange for an X79 chipset board, but there it is. You also get another M.2 slot, but this one is for SATA drives only, so you cannot use 2 NVMe drives in here. One of those has to be M.2 SATA. You get 4 memory slots. This is going to run in dual channel. You also get USB 3.0 connections for front I/O if you want that. One downside is that while there are 6 SATA ports, only 2 of them are SATA 3, so we will be hooking up our drives using SATA 2, which is 3 gigabits per second, which comes out to about 360 megabytes per second, which is perfectly fine based on the hard drive storage that we're using. It also has this power delivery cooler up here, so cooling your VRMs. I'm hoping that this little fan isn't too loud or annoying, but we will see. As for I/O, it looks like we get pretty standard stuff. You have PS2 ports, so if you're rocking some old school input devices, you get 4 USB 2.0 ports, 2 USB 3.0 ports, gigabit LAN, and your standard audio interface. Okay, let's get this party started. Here is our 2650. It is on Intel's 22 nanometer process, so pretty old, like I said, from about 2013. Okay, so let's put this down. Let's see what you get for $20. Oh, we got to put on our own bracket thingy. Okay, here it is. Nothing too special here. I mean, it's smaller than I thought it was, I guess. Because, what is this, a 92 millimeter fan? I thought it was. So this looks pretty straightforward. These clips clip onto here, and let's see, we want the fan blowing exhaust facing that way, so we need it to go this way. Okay, so it looks like there are 6 total heat pipes. I need thermal paste. I found thermal paste. Okay, so you should just, I'm not a fan of these old school AMD style clip mounts. There's one, and I'm an idiot. An idiot with an installed CPU fan. So we're good. Let's throw the RAM in there. We're in. Oh yeah, M.2 or NVMe drive. Okay, that is in. Always keep these motherboard covers for Intel boards, because for Intel boards, the pins are on the motherboard and those are the most fragile part. I guess we can put it in the case. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is the case. It's nothing special. I probably got it on sale a while ago off of Newegg for like 40 bucks. I already have the power supply installed in here and 3 of the hard drives. One of them is in the dedicated spot down here, but I had to MacGyver it a little bit, and 2 of the hard drives are actually up at the top. So let me tilt it, see if you can see that. They're actually up in here. And that is because that is the only spot I could find to fit them. And it's like my dad always said, if you can't fit your hard drives in the dedicated hard drive cage for the case that you bought, then look somewhere else and possibly put them in the exhaust section at the top. What do you think's in there? Not that exciting. So let's move these out of the way. Please fit. Oh, like a glove. Where the hell is this spacing? Okay, so there's some non-traditional spacing on these motherboard pins. So it definitely doesn't reach over here at all. It's like in between ATX or extended ATX and something else. So, okay, good enough. I'm legit sweating. Oh, put me in, coach. Studio lights plus Texas summer, bruh. Okay, in. Let's wire everything up now. Front panel, I can't remember the color scheme, and there's no real documentation. That they really don't give you any documentation with the motherboard, but I need to know what colors. Oh wait, it's up here. I'm an idiot. Oh my god, is this not gonna reach? Oh my god, it doesn't reach. One note, the 8-pin connector is very far away from the power supply, so even with an extension, I still had to route it in front of the motherboard, so I'm aware it's not the best cable managed system ever, but you'll be all right. So HD audio doesn't reach, so we're not getting HD audio. Ooh, this is ugly. We're gonna need some zip ties or something. Okay, let's get the last hard drive put in. Kind of just snaps in. There we go. So one thing you probably noticed, or may not have noticed, is that when I showed you the back I/O, you'll notice there was nowhere for video. You will have to install some type of video card. Now, you can literally go on eBay to your local thrift store. I've found a basket of these things for $5. So I honestly don't even know what card this is. We're done. Time to test it. Okay, moment of truth. Okay, everything's spinning. Hopefully we get some video output. Yes, we are in. 32 gigs DDR3. We are going to be installing Windows 10. For a home server, I generally use Proxmox, but for benchmarking purposes, it's just easier to just install Windows 10 on this. I don't really know what I'm going to do with this server yet, so this is just for the meantime. Okay, but does it recognize our NVMe drive? What is going on here? Oh, okay, here it is. Drive 4, 1 terabyte. That's our 1 terabyte NVMe drive, I think. Windows, I don't know if you can see, it's recognizing all 4 hard drives and our NVMe drive. So far, so good. Hopefully next time I see you, we will be booted into Windows and we can run some benchmarks. All right, so Windows installed without a hitch. I've actually been using it for a couple of hours now, and I'm pretty excited about the results. So let's jump into it. First of all, let's take a look at CPU-Z. You can see that, yes, the system is detecting the right processor, which makes sense. We have our Xeon E5 2650V2 at 2.6 gigahertz. And you can see it detects all 32 gigabytes of our RAM running at 1333 megahertz. So let's jump into some benchmarks. Cinebench R23, multi-core score. We got 5,710. Pretty impressive. Remember, this is a $30 processor. The score we got sits just below an Intel 7700K, which was my main processor that I was using for years. And while it is a couple of generations old, it still is a really powerful processor with 4 cores, 8 threads, and I was getting up to 5 gigahertz on it. So going toe to toe with that in multi-threaded processes is impressive. Now remember, this is a budget build. When we look at the single core results, it's not as exciting. That's simply because Xeon processors generally aren't good single core performers. They're meant to be multi-threaded workhorses. Single core performance, we got 567, which obviously isn't that great. So if your server is designed to run workloads that are centered around single core performance, or you're expecting to use this for gaming, you're not going to get the best performance. I mean, it's going to work. If you want to run lower end games on this, you can certainly do that depending on what graphics card you go with. Moving on to Cinebench, we got single core score of 553 and a multi-score core of 4680. So again, just like we saw in Cinebench, single core performance isn't that great, but multi-core score performance is very good for a $30 processor. Now let's talk about thermal. So what I did was in CPU-Z, completely slammed the CPU. I ran a stress on it, and it ran for about 30 minutes. And you can see here that we never even got over 50 degrees on the processor. So I am quite shocked, honestly, because these older Xeons and older Intel chips in general usually run hot, but man, for a $20 AliExpress cooler, wow. And honestly, it's not loud at all. The fan that I was hearing before that I mentioned, you can kind of hear, that's actually the power supply fan. My suggestion would be to maybe splurge a little bit more on a quality power supply, because from my experience, the lower end power supplies are generally the loudest. Man, we were even pegged at 3 gigahertz on all cores the entire time while running. So let's take a look at the storage. So like I mentioned before, this motherboard has NVMe built in, which is awesome, especially if you're going to be running multiple VMs. So as you can see here, we have a 1 terabyte drive, and for raw hard disk space, you'll see here we have 4.81 terabytes. And you're probably thinking, well, you had 4 2 terabyte drives, that's 8 terabytes. What happened? So basically I've gone into storage spaces and configured a pool out of those 4 drives. So what I've done is added a parity drive. So this is the equivalent of RAID 5. So essentially I have 3 of those drives operating to give me storage space, with 1 being a parity drive, meaning that 1 drive can fail and I can still recover all of the data off of that pool. Now let's take a look at the speeds of those drives and how they performed. I ran Crystal Disk Mark on the hard disk pool array, and pretty solid results. Obviously, we're running into that kind of threshold on the reads for SATA 2. SATA 2 caps out at around 360 theoretical max of megabytes per second. These results are perfectly fine for the price and for the use case of running this as a simple NAS server. If we switch over to our NVMe drive, we are seeing awesome results. And yes, the motherboard does have an NVMe slot, so these speeds are expected, but it's kind of up in the air when you have an NVMe slot on an X79 board on a no-name brand motherboard from China. So to see these results show what we expected is pretty awesome. So what would I suggest to use a server like this for? If you've never built a home server before or never had one and you're interested in it but don't really want to spend a lot of money, this is a solid starter system. I mean, you're getting 8 cores, 16 threads, 32 gigs of ECC memory. It's slow, but you have 32 gigs of it. You have NVMe speeds, and you have 8 terabytes of raw hard disk space. So all that for $450? You'd be hard pressed to find a package like that on eBay or even Craigslist. Another use case for this would be a backup or test server. This has more than enough horsepower to run mostly everything you could want. Obviously, if you need something graphically intensive, you're not going to want something like this. This isn't for you. I can certainly see this being beneficial for me if I want to test certain things before pushing them to my production server. Or if you want to use this as your production server, go ahead. Although I wouldn't really recommend using Windows 10 as your base operating system. I'm a big fan of Proxmox, and I just saw that TrueNAS is releasing a new version based on Linux, which will give you a lot more features to make TrueNAS more of a dedicated hypervisor rather than just a dedicated NAS. So be interested in checking that out. But that's it. I'm extremely happy with how this turned out, from the price to the build process to setting everything up. It all went way smoother than I thought it would. I'm still trying to decide what I want to use this for. So if you have any suggestions, leave them down below in the comments. And if any of you have some good ideas, I'll definitely consider them. And if I use them, I'll make a video about it and give you a shout out. So let me know. But that's it. I hope you liked this. I hope this gave you some inspiration to get into home servers, or at least alleviate some of that fear that building a server has to be this expensive, scary process. So if you liked it, awesome. Leave a like below. If you like content like this, be sure you're subscribed, and I have a couple more videos on home servers coming soon, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those, and I will see y'all in the next one.